Welcome folks from Dallas, Texas, Cape Cod, Berea, Ohio, Tinley Park, Illinois, Virginia, Toledo, Ohio, Nevada. We're going to be starting just here at the top of the hour, maybe a minute after. Hello from Reading, Pennsylvania. Cincinnati, Ohio.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started with the EcoAction in just 2 minutes, give a few more minutes for people to join, and we'll be ready to rock and roll. Hi, folks. We're going to get started in just about 30 seconds. Well, I guess maybe we'll start right now. My name is Mark Dunlea, and co-chair of the EcoAction Committee of the Green Party of the United States, based in New York State, outside of Albany. And on behalf of the EcoAction Committee of the Green Party, we want to welcome you to our webinar tonight. I'm going to quickly put up an agenda for the evening. But basically, the idea behind this evening is to let people know about Earth Day to May Day, which is an event that the Green Party EcoAction Committee has been promoting for several years. This year's theme of Earth Day to May Day is the Eco-Socialist Green New Deal, the rights of nature, and real zero, not net zero. And, one will have to say that, particularly with the recent report, again, from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, no time is left. The United Nations has sounded the alarm that the states taken by governments since the Paris Climate Accord 6 years ago are grossly inadequate to prevent climate collapse or even to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees centigrade. At the present rate of emissions, we will use up our remaining carbon budget in 7 years. We need system change, not climate change. Another world is essential to the future of humanity. We're asking everybody to join us in the struggle by organizing Earth Day to May Day events locally to highlight people, planet, and peace over profit. Organize rallies, teach-in, protest, call-ins, occupy, and direct action. So what we're going to do tonight is our first speaker, after I give a little introduction, will be Howie Hawkins, the most recent Green Party nominee for president, back in the 2010 campaign for governor of New York as a Green Party candidate. Howie first launched his version of the Green New Deal, an eco-socialist Green New Deal. And he'll talk a bit about the sort of the overview of Earth Day to May Day. And then our prior presidential nominee, Jill Stein, is going to talk about the effort by her and the GPACS committee and others to launch Earth Strike 2022 for people, planet, and peace over profit. Markie Miller will be joining us to talk about the rights of nature. She's active with Ohio Greens and the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. About 9:30, Dawn Marie Green Cronen, who is the EcoAction Committee co-chair, We'll be talking about the issue of, I think, particularly Lake Michigan and fracking and the impact upon water. And then we'll have Q&A, questions and answers, about 9:35 or so, for about half an hour. You can post the questions, in your chat. Earth Day to May Day, I think, is particularly important this year. Maybe it's the last Earth Day that the world actually has an opportunity to take action to prevent, climate collapse. We obviously been very disappointed with President Biden, his refusal to become a climate president by taking a series of climate actions, executive orders that many groups, including with the Build Back Fossil Free campaign, have outlined. And certainly his ever shrinking Build Back Better proposal is nowhere near the type of eco-socialist Green New Deal that the Green Party has been calling for. I will just mention, we'll go into more detail when we introduce Markie Miller, but GPAS, or EcoAction, is promoting the rights of nature. Rights of nature is a recognition of legally enforceable rights of natural entities. And as I said, we'll be going into more detail about that when we have Markie Miller speak. But at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Howie Hawkins, who I've known 25, 30 years. Howie often has run for local office here in New York State. 3 times he's been our gubernatorial candidate, probably a 4th time coming up. 3 times we've been able to make our ballot status in New York because of the vote total that Howie got. In his 2010 campaign for governor, Howie not only called for a ban on fracking at a time when most of the other big name environmental groups were only willing to support a moratorium on fracking, but he also called for a Green New Deal, particularly eco-socialist Green New Deal. And we've asked Howie to come in and give us both a background on the Green New Deal, but also how this all ties into Earth Day to May Day. So Howie.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, Earth Day to May Day. I mean, Earth Day and May Day are linked. I want to talk about that for a minute. And the eco-socialist Green New Deal that we have been putting out there combines the themes of both days, the Earth Day environmental theme with an emergency program for 100% decarbonization of the economy in a decade, and the May Day workers' rights theme with an economic bill of rights. That's what's in the eco-socialist Green New Deal. And these 2 themes are connected both politically and historically. Politically, I mean, it's obvious. We can't win and sustain majority support for a radical program to rapidly decarbonize the economy without assuring the economic security of working people and communities. So that's what the Economic Bill of Rights, that's why it's so important part of the Green New Deal. And historically, May Day was the original Earth Day before the rise of industrial capitalism. It celebrated the arrival of spring and all that is free and life-giving on the green earth. That's our common wealth and heritage. You know, think of the maypole, one of those older traditions that's still around, the first day of spring. That's the green tradition of May Day. The red tradition of May Day developed in response to the rise of capitalism, and particularly out of the Haymarket Massacre, where workers in Chicago were killed fighting for the 8-hour day. And it became, thanks to Lucy Parsons, look her up, Google her if you don't know who she was, made it an international day of observance, and in many countries, a public holiday. So I think we should see the red tradition of socialism and May Day as a way to recover the ecological sustainability of the green tradition of May Day that rejoice and sanctify the earth. Because that socialist tradition, that workers' tradition, is about repossessing our land, our tools of production, our means to life. It can be seen as what we call eco-socialism. It's about full economic and political democracy that will give the power to the people, so we can choose to meet the needs of all within ecological limits, instead of being subject powerlessly to capitalism's inherent competitive structural drive for blind, relentless growth that is devouring the environment. So I'm going to put in the chat a link that goes into this history a little more. It's an article I wrote called May Day is Red and Green. And it should be in there by now. Did I hit the right thing? Wait a minute. There it goes. So what is the eco-socialist Green New Deal? Well, the Green New Deal has been the signature issue of the Green Party for more than a decade. As Mark mentioned, we first ran on it in New York in 2010. And by August of that year, we had nearly 100 Greens around the country sign off on a Green New Deal federal program. And then in my presidential campaign in 2020, we emphasized that it's an eco-socialist Green New Deal because we now have to distinguish it from the watered down corporate welfare version of the Green New Deal that some of these progressive Democrats are reporting. They co-opted the slogan and radically diluted the content. If you look at the AOC Markie non-binding resolution they introduced in the Congress, it gutted the Green Party's Green New Deal. They eliminated the ban on fracking and all new fossil fuel infrastructure. They eliminated the phase out of nuclear power. They eliminated the deep cuts in military spending to help pay for the Green New Deal. They extended the deadline by 20 years from 2030 to 2050 for zero emissions, but then they changed it from real zero emissions to net zero emissions, which means continuing to burn fossil fuels alongside phony solutions like carbon offsets and carbon capture and storage. So, and I think just as significantly, the progressive Democrats' Green New Deal also watered down the Green Party's Green New Deal that featured economic democracy, a socialist framework. The Democrats' Green New Deal is a market-oriented program of corporate welfare incentives for the corporations instead of public ownership and democratic planning of the energy transition. It leaves the corporations that got us into this mess, big coal, oil and gas, the auto giants, the power utility giants, the petrochemical, steel and cement industries and so forth, it leaves them in charge. And the corporate welfare, you know, it's tax breaks, subsidies, loan guarantees. It relies on hit or miss coordination of scores of corporations. And, you know, I'm not going to go into two quick examples because I only have so much time. But to get the transition done in the rapid time frame we're talking about, to minimize the danger from climate change that's already baked into Earth's climate system, we need public planning and enterprises, not unreliable market incentives dependent on the separate profit-oriented decisions of scores of corporations. We need coordinated planning. So everything from supply chains to the integration of different sectors can be worked out instead of it being scattered among scores of corporations. We need to act like we did during World War II. In that emergency, the feds took over a quarter of the manufacturing capacity of this country in order to turn industry on a dime into what FDR called the arsenal of democracy, to arm the allies to defeat the fascists. We need to do nothing less through the public sector to defeat climate change. So there's an eco-socialist Green New Deal budget, and I'll put the link to that that my campaign worked out. And it's, you know, rough estimates, but it was a realistic assessment. And we came up with $41.7 trillion over 10 years. You know, that's compared to less than 1 trillion, all the Democrats except Bernie Sanders, who had a $16 trillion program. His was pretty serious and it had some socialist elements, but the rest of them, and of course, Build Back Better wasn't even a Green New Deal. So it's 41.7 trillion, gets to zero to negative emissions and 100% clean energy by 10 years. It was 2030 when we were running, and meets the basic needs of all. And by our estimate, it would create 38 million jobs, including 8.7 million in manufacturing. So it was really two parts. There's a green economy reconstruction program. That's a transition to clean energy and zero to negative emissions. That was 27.5 trillion. And that was 30.5 million jobs, including 8.5 million in manufacturing. And then there was 14.2 trillion for the Economic Bill of Rights. And that would end poverty and economic insecurity by guaranteeing the rights to a living wage job, an income above poverty, affordable housing through a radical expansion of quality public housing, quality healthcare through a universal public healthcare system, lifelong public education from childcare and pre-K through college and trade school, and a secure retirement by increasing Social Security benefits. And the Economic Bill of Rights would create another 7.6 million jobs, including 300,000 in manufacturing. So that's a lot of money, 41.7 over 10 years. It would almost be as much as the federal government is going to spend without it in the next decade. But we're in a crisis, and we got to do this through the public sector to get it done. And also in that program was $100 billion a year or $1 trillion over the decade for a global Green New Deal. That would be the US contribution to helping mitigate the loss and damages that countries, particularly in the global South, are already suffering from climate change, and help them, leap out of the 19th century fossil fuel age and the 21st century solar age. And that $100 billion a year was what was supposed to go into the Global Climate Fund coming out of these COP, summits they've had, like Paris in 2018, and they haven't even got 10% of that committed. So that's what really needs to be done. And I'm gonna skip through here, and so I finish within 10 minutes. So that's what we need to look at. I'll put the link to that budget so you can look at it when you have time and see what you think. But the fact is, we're in a real emergency. The International Panel on Climate Change Sixth Assessment Report says we have to peak greenhouse gas emissions by 2025. That's about 1,000 days from now. And that's just to have a 50-50 chance of staying below 1.5 degrees Celsius rise in global temperatures. I mean, we're already leaning over the cliff, losing our balance. Kevin Anderson of the Tyndall Center of Climate Change Research in the UK, who is probably the most prominent climate scientist, I think better research than the International Panel on Climate Change reports, because they got to get consensus of all the countries before their report goes out. And that includes petrostates like Saudi Arabia and Russia and the US. So their recommendations gets watered down. Kevin Anderson's report, and this came out about the same time as the Sixth Assessment Report, said that rich countries like the US have to cut emissions by 70% by 2030 and 100% by 2034 to have a 50-50 chance of staying below 1.5 degrees rise in temperatures. And the business as usual pathway now is at least a rise of 3 degrees. Beyond 1.5 degrees lies growing regions around the world that are too hot for human habitation, mass species extinctions, the collapse of ecosystems, which means the collapse of agriculture, and mass starvation. And they estimate hundreds of millions of climate refugees. So real solutions can't wait. The Green Party has it. The Democrats and let alone the Republicans are not even close to real solutions or any solutions. So it's up to the Green Party to advance this eco-socialist Green New Deal. It's really what we need, and we got to fight for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Howie. So we are encouraging people to, organize local events around Earth Day to May Day, to draw the connections between the various issues of economic justice, climate, Black Lives Matter movement, indigenous rights, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer rights. So all those issues are connected, and particularly to draw the issue of war. We cannot continue to go to war for fossil fuels. And one of the people who's been organizing a specific event around the Earth Day to May Day theme is one of our prior presidential candidates, former candidate Green Party for governor in Massachusetts, a doctor who decided it was time to, besides healing patients, time to heal the political system and the planet, Dr. Jill Stein.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay, terrific. So thank you so much. Thanks to the EcoAction Committee and everybody here tonight for being a part of this, big push, because like Mark said at the start, it really is now or never, like the IPCC report said. And thank you to Howie for really outlining beautifully, the policies that we need. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Earth Day strike for People, Planet, and Peace, which is really looks at the idea of, so we need this stuff and how do we push for it? And, we've seen how hard it is to have that policy dialogue that we try to have through our campaigns and through, participation in environmental groups and so on. So, the purpose of Earth Day to May Day is to help galvanize grassroots leadership, really, for where we need to go and to move beyond our political systems, the nonprofit industrial complex, and so on, that are so bogged down by the powers that be and unable to really push forward, and especially the two-party system that is really bought and paid for by the parties of war on Wall Street, and they really don't go much beyond that, and the climate catastrophe that all that has caused. So what can we do as grassroots groups? And that's where this idea of the Earth Day strike comes in. And I like Mark's name, the Earth Strike. We'll have to think about that one too, because we do want to continue this beyond just Earth Day. But for now, it's the Earth Day strike for People, Planet, and Peace over profit. And the idea is to kick off really 10 days of action from Earth Day to May Day. And I'm just going to share my screen here. Let me just see, make sure I can do that. Hang on one second. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Says host disabled participant screen share. Michael, can you help me out with that?
We'll actually need Mark to set that for you. So Mark, can you set Jill to be a co-host, please?
I'll start in here. Let's see, Mark, are you there? Do you hear us? Mark is muted. All right. Well, maybe someone can try texting or something just to be
No,
sure.
you are now co-host.
Oh, great. Okay, terrific. Thank you. So I am sharing. All right. Are you seeing my PowerPoint?
We're seeing a lot of things, but we are seeing Earth Day strike for People, Planet, and Peace over profit.
All right, great. So we'll just work through this. Got a few slides here. So the idea is to jumpstart these 10 days of grassroots action. And this grew out of a webinar with GPACs, the Green Party Peace Action Committee. The webinar was on nonviolence in a violent world. What is the role of civil disobedience and direct action? And that had a really broad participation across the spectrum of labor groups, including the striking union at the Met Coal plant, some members of that effort, as well as, lots of enviros, indigenous resistance at line 3, anti-nuclear activists, a lot of people who've done jail time for civil disobedience and direct action, and people who've really been part of the fight at the grassroots level to push the envelope. And clearly we're at a point where we really need to push the envelope right now. So anyhow, we adopted this model, the model of the global climate convergence, which was what we began Earth Day to May Day with back in 2015, where we're basically pushing for emergency action and transformative solutions solutions as big as the crises barreling down on us. And the idea is also to build solidarity across movements, people, planet, and peace, because they're really all essential for the survival of the planet and ought not to be excluded from Earth Day. And I'll come back to that. But the idea is if we build solidarity across movements, because all of these things are essential and all of the issues of justice really are inseparable from climate justice and from war as well, which, also really intensifies the hardships and, crushing inequality and so on. That's all, worsened by climate change. Add to that war and violence. It's really going ballistic as it is right now that we're witnessing right before our very eyes. So the idea is let's build solidarity. Let's push back against this game of divide and conquer and see what kinds of linkages we can be building at the grassroots and community level. So let me just run through a couple slides here very quickly. So the overarching call here is to halt the engines of destruction, ecological, economic, and military. And it includes the various things that Mark enumerated at the beginning: sit-ins, teach-ins, school, work stoppages, boycotts, pickets, whatever you want to do. And there's also some much simpler stuff. And at this late stage of the game, what can you organize if there's not something happening near you? Well, there's the speak out, the speak out of multiple groups, basically affirming that we have a joint agenda and that together we are unstoppable. And again, we're focusing on these many issues from climate collapse, endless war, crushing inequality, the assault on freedom of press, privacy, protest, and so on. I won't go over the issues. We know what the environmental issues and threats are right now, but I just want to mention a couple things really quickly. One, that the Thwaites Glacier, the shelf has 2 to 5 years and it's gone. And what follows that is a 2-foot sea level rise, which is essentially a disaster for all coastal inhabitants around the world. That is very close to happening. This is, again, just by way of compelling people or giving people compelling reasons about why we really need to mobilize right now. That shelf is going to go very fast. The Colorado River is 75% depleted, and it provides half the fruits and vegetables in the United States. So that that food shortage, which is impacting, the whole world right now, especially, the poorer parts of it, that's coming here to us as well, and likely very soon. We want to acknowledge that war is an environmental threat. And right now we're looking at the potential for war to be accelerating massively. And I know many people are, trying to deal with that right now and to push back against it, including the fact that the US military, if it was a nation, would be 47th among carbon emitters and is the largest producer of greenhouse gases of any single organization. Nuclear weapons, which we are, hearing so much about now, so cavalierly in the major drumbeat for war that's going on right now, the mainstream message and the Defense Department talking points that we're hearing now, are, particularly from the media, shall we say, are extremely reckless about, why not go nuclear. And it's just really important, I think, to include in Earth Day that nuclear weapons are a terminal and rapidly terminal issue for us that really is on a par with climate threats. And I won't go into this, but the press on this issue lately has been just astounding, and the misinformation that nuclear war is survivable, or that you can prepare yourself, or there are things you can do. I mean, it's just like staggering that this is actually being put out there now, including on government websites. And why the notion of a strike? The strike, because the strike is an indispensable issue for transformative social and political change. And even though we're calling this an Earth Day strike, we're saying support a strike near you. You know, it doesn't have to be a work stoppage or a school stoppage. We can also be supporting workers in our communities that are on strike, whether it's Starbucks or Amazon or whatever. There are ways that we can just begin to build greater solidarity with the strike, because eventually we're going to need it, and sooner rather than later. So by beginning to organize for the strike, we can begin to develop those skills and those connections. The last thing I want to mention, and this is a simple thing you can do, is to join the gasoline boycott, which is no fossil fuels, no war, and no climate catastrophe. And it basically looks at the central role of fossil fuels in driving both of those engines towards war and towards climate catastrophe. And we are, raising the call for a windfall profits tax on fossil fuel corporations to fund stimulus checks and to fund clean transportation. And finally, I just want to mention the website, which is earthdaystrike2022.org, where you can sign up, you can join in, you can put an event, even if it's as simple as a standout, to stop fossil fuels or to save some water body or open space near you, but just to begin to get in the habit of doing this and to build our solidarity in doing this together. And if you go to Earth Day Strike 2022, you can also join the fossil fuel boycott there and be a part of this broader grassroots pushback for real transformative change, which we need immediately. It's not going to happen without us. It will only happen because we're pushing for it and we're pushing together. I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jill, and both Jill and Howie will be back shortly for questions and answers. So you can begin to work them. The EcoAction Committee is promoting rights of nature efforts as part of our Earth Day to May Day campaign. Early this year, for People's Day, we held an Indigenous webinar, and we also, particularly with Lizzie Adams, her contribution to the recent Global Greens Conference Rights of Nature session, highlighting Indigenous worldviews and green efforts across the world. Rights of nature is a recognition of legally enforceable rights of natural entities. Since we see the regulatory failure of governments to conserve our life-sustaining environment, engaging in earth jurisprudence campaigns and cases can help us in the struggle to protect our local waters, species, and ecosystems. So next we'll be hearing from Markie Miller about the efforts that Ohio Greens engaged in on the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. Markie is an active rights and nature advocate. She was a spokesperson and lead organizer for the effort in Toledo, Ohio, the first U.S. settler colonial land to recognize the rights of the Pacific ecosystem. She currently works with Public Herald Incorporated and the directors of Invisible Hand, a rights of nature documentary, as a grant writer. Markie.
Thank you. I'm trying to get this to share here. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for including me in your lineup. My group here in Toledo, Toledoans for Safe Water, has a lot of Green Party membership. The Lake Erie Bill of Rights was not necessarily started as a Green Party effort, so I don't want to misrepresent the entire group, but we do appreciate seeing rights of nature picked up in political platforms, and I feel like we worked really hard to make it a serious issue and kind of bring that new idea or at least an alternative idea to the table. So I do appreciate the support from the Green Party on that. Our time's really limited, so I'll try to go kind of fast through some of this. If you're a little unfamiliar with the rights of nature movement, it is a recognition of ecosystems or nature, natural communities as living rights-bearing entities rather than property. So it is rooted in stewardship, not ownership. It also helps us sort of get away from that idea of nature viewed only as a resource, which often is an idea that's rooted in extraction. When we talk about resources, we talk about nature not necessarily as a living entity anymore. So we want to be careful with that kind of language. It's not a new idea, but we do credit the idea to indigenous belief systems. You've probably heard people talk a little more lately about traditional ecological knowledge. And we try to honor that and understanding that indigenous people, those indigenous communities are the keepers of that knowledge. So they need to be at the forefront of that conversation. I can do my best to honor that relationship. I can't speak for those communities. So what I can talk about is how rights of nature has sort of been translated into Western culture. Not exclusively, but quite predominantly, it has been viewed and attempted within a legal framework. And that's often a natural first step as an introduction into the movement, but it can be problematic if efforts don't challenge the current legal structures. If efforts attempt to coexist with what we have today, coexist with capitalism, we see this movement as a way of creating confrontation, and we create confrontation between those structures. And when we maintain a goal of exposing what our legal and regulatory systems really protect, which is often just corporate rights and corporate interest. So that idea of nature as a resource, nature as property, can't coexist with the idea of nature as a life-supporting system or recognized as a rights-bearing entity. And I do want to point out that we try to say we're recognizing those rights, not granting those rights. When you make that change, even without that language change in your head, you understand that these are rights that have been ignored for a long time, not just something we're bestowing onto nature. They are inherent. They've always been there. We've just been ignoring them. I will tell the Libor story very quickly. It normally takes quite a long time, so you're going to get the abridged version. But the catalyst for our effort was the water crisis of 2014. Here in Toledo, a toxic bloom of cyanobacteria or blue-green algae made our water not only undrinkable, but untouchable. And the response to this crisis was really unsatisfactory. So over time, a small group from Toledo got together with the consultation and legal support of the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund to create a petition and amend our city charter with this rights of nature law called the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. I just have some pictures of people waiting in line for a ration of water during that time, the shelves being kind of cleared out. All the produce, although I don't have a picture of it, was all thrown out because you can see it's being sprayed with water. So a lot of food was thrown out. And of course, we have these signs everywhere, the NPDES permits saying that we have these combined sewage overflow areas. This one in particular is at a kayak launch in the Maumee River. So we kind of don't have a good head on our shoulders with planning. So we got organized, right? And of course, this is not the first time Lake Erie had a lot of organizing around it. We collected as a group over 10,500 signatures by hand. And despite meeting those requirements, we were kept off the ballot. We protested, we pushed back, we were in and out of court until eventually we were able to join a special election that was being held for another local charter amendment that was kept off the ballot, mainly because they used our petition language, and it was they were both sort of struck down at the same time. So we had this special election in February of 2019, but we had a lot of opposition, and for the most part, our opposition, it was almost exclusively statewide and nationwide groups, not a ton of local opposition. It was a lot of outsiders coming in. And just this first list here, in a local legal election case, this is the group that filed an amicus brief against us, saying that we should not be on the ballot. And this was before we had really any kind of publicity whatsoever. So you can see we were sort of already on the radar, already being watched by that. We also had, about 2 weeks before the election, the Vote No campaign got started, and suddenly we were inundated with this propaganda from a group that called themselves the Toledo Jobs and Growth Coalition, I believe, which no one had ever heard of before. What was really great is that we had all this pushback. We're just this little grassroots, tiny group, kind of doing it ourselves and scrapping things together. And we won. We won the election with 61% of the vote. And it wasn't until after the election we found out that the entire Vote No campaign, which spent $300,000, was funded exclusively by BP out of Houston, Texas, so oil and gas. And, our victory was very rewarding, but short-lived, because we had a farm entity sue the city of Toledo. The state of Ohio joined that entity. And of course, what was really amazing was that this grain farm said that their civil rights as legal persons were being violated. Those were the rights that they were guaranteed under the 14th Amendment were being violated by our local law. So it was a pretty shocking thing to sit there and read, especially when we were told that as petitioners, as actual people, we were not allowed to intervene in this lawsuit. Unfortunately, after a year of back and forth discussions and having this go to trial, Judge Zuhari, a federal judge in Toledo, said that harm had come to the state of Ohio because of our law, that we had hurt them on paper, referring to taking aim at their ability to issue permits and regulate, and in our mind, legalize the harms we were trying to protest against. While that's frustrating, it was very validating. This is literally the point that we wanted to make, was that we wanted to take aim at that regulatory process. So causing that harm to the state of Ohio was very validating and showed that our effort had a lot of teeth. In that same ruling, he also said that we were unconstitutionally vague and unenforceable, and merely a value statement that was well-intentioned. So how we kind of create harm and also are unenforceable and vague is beyond me. But what we need to understand is that what we're talking about is really just one moment in a larger movement. Toledo kind of added fuel to a fire that was already burning and is going across the globe, but the power of it remains in its ability to inspire. So communities who know the story, who know what we're up against, know who the opposition is going into this, can basically predict every move they're going to make, but they want to do it anyways, because we have the ability to envision a different reality. We have that creativity. We want something different, and we are going to be advocates for that, despite the likelihood of it, which sort of brings me back to the quote earlier that
Markie, we're beginning to run out of time.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna wrap that up then. But thank you so much for including me.
Well, thank you. And we're going to finish up. Then you can come back for questions and answer. But the other EcoAction Committee co-chair is Dawn Marie Green Cronen, and she wanted to talk a little bit about the campaign they've had locally about fracking, the impact upon the water table and Lake Michigan, and then people should get ready for their questions for our panelists.
Thank you so much, Mark. I am here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Amazing. We are literally, I'm by South Haven, and I go all the way up and down to Traverse City and up towards Mackinac. Literally, we have another waterway that is just as important as the oceans. Our fresh water, just like we just heard, is so important for us. I'm not going to go ahead and go into everything I had. I want to leave some time for the questions and answers. I'll go ahead and add this information in after the video is, before it's recorded. I've got a few slideshows that we'll just add to this. But I want to say, remember, everything you do makes a difference. As small as it might be, One step at a time is how we're going to make a difference. That's how you get up mountains. That's how you go down mountains, unless you're going to start skiing down them, which is exactly what the planet is doing. We are in a slide. We have that ability together to make a difference. We can change as a group, as a community, but we each have to take our own individual actions, which is why we're all here tonight, thinking about this, talking about this, seeing what we can do to all help contribute to make a difference, to make it so that our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren have the same amazing world that we're on right here. It might not be the same one. We've literally been in a crisis situation for 3.5, possibly 4 years. And here's the real amazing thing that I want everyone to think about. Think about what was happening back in the 1940s. We know a lot more than we did back then. Let's use that knowledge and let's make some changes. Let's go ahead and open it up now to some question and answers. Mark?
Yes, okay. Please write your questions and answers. Not your answers. Your questions in the chat. I see that Cindy has one. Are there, probably it jumps. Are there any Earth Day to May Day events planned along waterways? Any of our panelists have an Earth Day event planned along Earth Day, along the waterway?
Yes, I do. Actually organizing quite a few in all of the, I've got about 15 different towns that there's events that are getting organized. Michigan is also a state that is trying very much to be environmentally active and protective of our waterways and of everything else that's going on. Fracking, the deliberate pumping of water into an oil well, which thus contaminates the fresh water or salt water that is pushed into that oil well, is the same thing that happens in the oceans, and it's the same things that's caused so many problems worldwide. There's no more comments on that. Let's just say it doesn't matter. My name's Dawn Marie, and Dawn Dish Soap is one of the ones that helps with the wildlife. Literally, think of the smallest thing that you can do to make a change and just start doing it. Over.
So another question we have is an ecos.
I was going to tell you what we're going to do in New York in that period.
Okay.
We have a monster petition to get done between April 19th and May 31st, 45,000 signatures, good signatures in 42 days to get the Green Party back on the ballot. So that whole period, we're going to be talking to people one-on-one, getting their signature and handing them a flyer that'll be about these issues. And so, you know, Greens all over the state will be doing that. And anybody here who's in New York or close to it and wants to help, go to our state party webpage, gpny.org, and sign up, and we can put you to work on Earth Day, on May Day, and every day between April 19th and May 31st.
Okay, a follow-up question. Is an eco-socialist Green New Deal feasible given the current political polarization of the United States electorate? I see both Howie and Jill are moving forward. Let's go Jill first, since Howie just spoke, then we'll go Howie.
You know, it's not, I mean, in my view, it's not just the polarization, it's just the incredible corruption and dysfunction of the bipartisan, corporate captured political system, which is the best democracy money can buy, which is no democracy at all. And, you know, the Congress and the White House can agree on very little other than increasing the military budget and diverting resources from essential public health to, you know, to weapons and war. So our problem is not only the lack of a Green New Deal, it's really the lack of any basic action on behalf of our critical needs, which is, you know, why the Earth Day strike is really focused on not only our environmental crisis, but also our social and economic crisis, and our crisis of war. Those things are very much connected. But the good thing here is that the public is not buying what we are being force-fed, not one bit. And if you look at polls, for example, it's not only that 2/3 of the public, not quite 2/3, but almost, the demand for another political option is off the charts, in the same way that the old parties are underwater. Their approval is running around 33%, 33% approval, and their disapproval is running 44 and 48%, much bigger than their approval. The disapproval is a little more for Democrats than it is for Republicans. So people are not happy campers. Likewise, faith in our government institutions is running at 25% for all ages, 21% for young people, who also are polling at a 50% rate of hopelessness and a 25% rate of contemplating self-harm within the last 2 weeks. So we have essentially a political, social, as well as environmental system, which is crashing and burning right before our very eyes, with the media, the corporate media, being as corrupted as it is, which people also widely revile. Worse, the attitude towards the press is even worse in the US than it is in 47 other industrialized nations. It's very hard to break through this. So I guess the point here is that it's very hard to move anything forward, which is why, in my view, it's really important that we learn to be out there in the streets and we learn to build collaboration across movements, because one movement at a time, we're going to be divided and conquered. That doesn't mean that every particular issue is not critical. Every particular issue is very critical, but we need to essentially double time. We've got to do our work on our local issues, whether it's your water body or your fracking site or your line or a local union and a strike that you're supporting. All of that is really important. And at the same time, we want to begin to start building coalitions across our movements, because when we get together, when we synchronize our clocks and we're out there together, then we become an unstoppable movement. And that's exactly the reason why many of us wanted to start thinking about how do we up the ante on our action here, because it's very hard. It's virtually impossible to move progressive policy. One really can't move any policy. That's been proven for a long time. You have to buy policy in the Congress. That's just how it works. That's been proven over and over. We have to really build the social movement here as we go.
Howie, do you have anything you wanted to add quickly?
Yeah. The people aren't polarized about a Green New Deal. Public opinion polling, lots of polls, well over 60%, 2-to-1. The people want a Green New Deal. They want to deal with climate action. We're not polarized. The problem is public opinion doesn't translate into public policy in this political system.
That's right.
Who's polarized are the elites. We got neoliberal capitalist Democrats and neo-fascist Republicans. Republicans aren't a conservative party anymore. They're an extremist party, which is hard, makes it harder for the Greens when we run, because progressive-minded people, they like our platform, they want to vote for us, but they're afraid of the Republicans, so they settle for the Democrats to stop the Republicans. Which means I think one of our priorities has to be changing the way we elect people. We have an exclusionary electoral system based on single member districts, winner take all, which means we get a spoiler problem in every election. People have to choose the lesser evil if they want to stop the extremist Republicans. So what we need to fight for is ranked choice voting for executive offices, proportional representation in legislatures through multi-member districts with ranked choice voting. And that would give the Greens, we'd have a lot of people in legislative bodies if we had that. And we can win this. We have more than double the number of ranked choice voting jurisdictions since the 2020 election, over 50 of them. We're winning that. And we can expand that to ranked choice voting in multi-member districts for proportional representation. That would be a game changer. Then, you know, what people want, they can vote for it. And then we'll have people in office that public opinion will be reflected in public policy. So I think it's feasible, but we got to change our political system, which is exclusionary and anti-democratic.
Okay. I suspicion this question may be from Markie. Is there a version of the LEBOR that includes an enforcement mechanism?
There's not an additional version of LEBOR, and unfortunately, enforcement is one of those things that's going to be a turning point for the movement. We just haven't made it that far. But I will say that when we do get groups saying we want to do this, can we just swap out our ecosystem for Lake Erie? We say no. You need to build on what we did. Don't just copy it. Make those changes, but add to it. And enforcement is becoming more and more of a talking point so that people can start to envision what that looks like. It's difficult for a lot of us, myself included, because rights of nature is really about preventing the harm from happening. And we haven't really been conditioned that same way. We're told, like, let's wait until it happens and then we'll deal with it. That's our whole concept of justice, right? It's wait for the harm and then we'll deal with it and you'll get some kind of retribution. So we want to start getting people to think differently about that and think about enforcement in a different way, which is hard when you have regulatory agencies being run by corporate lobbyists writing their own rules, issuing their own permits. And basically, even then, enforcement is if you get caught, if the problem is seen, if it's big enough, and you get fined and you keep going. So there's not a lot of stopping it from happening. It's just dealing with it when it happens. So would love to see the movement get to that point.
Okay. We have sort of a three-part question. I'm going to try to boil it down. How's the Green Party approaching other third parties, common goals, something about Lobby 3 DLT, Campaign Fund and Forum, and Federal Reserve? Who has a short answer on that one?
I could start with the party question. Look, the Libertarians and Andrew Yang and his Forward Party, they're capitalist parties. I mean, we talked about the inherent growth in capitalism that's destroying the environment. It also steals our labor. We don't get the full fruit of our labor. That's why we have such great inequality, particularly in this neoliberal age where so many of the regulations and floors and social protections have been removed. And then the competition between capitalists and capitalist states for resources and cheap labor and markets generates war. I mean, those are the three horsemen of our apocalypse, the ecology, the wars, and inequality, which is a life or death issue. So, I think if there are other progressive parties that develop, we should try to work with them. But the fact is, the Green Party is the only national party that's progressive on the ballot and trying to run candidates. So let's build the Green Party. Don't look for shortcuts. I won't try to answer all three questions.
That's okay. Anybody else want to jump in? So, people out there thinking about organizing Earth Day to May Day events, we encourage them to organize rallies, speak outs, direct action, support existing efforts that are going on. What other ideas do people have about how to, now that I realize I had a Freudian slip about the Earth strike, what other ideas do people have that they can be doing for Earth Day to May Day this year? That was a question for the panelists.
Oh, for the panel.
Oh, panelists, yes.
Well, I mean, there's not a lot of time, but it doesn't take very long to organize a speak out, and it could be about your local fight with a fracking site, or that you need single payer, Medicare for all, I think organizing locally about what matters locally is important, and connecting with existing groups and helping to build bridges across those groups. We found when we took the Earth Day strike, which by the way has an agenda, which is essentially the Green New Deal, with a little bit more, but it's mostly the Green New Deal. When we brought that to people, they were, we're just in a really funny historic moment right now where people are kind of ready to do things they haven't been ready to do for quite a while. And we've been finding, single payer groups endorsing this, Earth Day strike, and, environmental, climate, anti-war, Assange, press freedom, and so on, and prison justice. Just people are really, in my experience, are really looking for a way to step things up and to build a bigger movement than we've been accustomed to doing. And people are feeling extremely frustrated, whether they are Greens or others. People are just really hungry for more transformative goals and a different way of organizing. So I'd say, go to earthdaystrike2022.org, and you can look at the agenda. You can look at the groups that have been signing up, and a lot of different kinds of things. In Philadelphia, it's a group that is doing a march for drug treatment on demand for opioids, which is a huge problem in poor communities. So the thing is to do something. And if it's nothing more than even just signing on to the boycott for fossil fuels, to just be a part of connecting and building a bigger movement at this really historic moment, which is a breaking point in virtually every capacity. Use your issue as a bridge point to turn the breaking point into a tipping point. And by doing this in a way that is together and unified through basically through the eco-socialist Green New Deal agenda, it's just a great way to connect at the grassroots level. It's really simple and easy to do. It's as easy as sending out an email, or making a couple of phone calls and standing there with a sign and putting your event up on the Earth Day Strike website. And we continue to build from there.
Right. I will say, Lizzie keeps on pointing out to me the correct hashtag is hashtag ED number 2 MD for Earth Day to May Day. People can write letters to the editor. I think we really have to say this is a really special Earth Day, because the United Nations Secretary General cannot be any clearer. We are messing up the planet. Time is running out, and the politicians are not taking this seriously. And, we need to say that, and we need to emphasize the connections that all these issues are interconnected. I'm going to give everybody, we're really out of time. So the panelists, you want to think about your closing remarks. One last question. Has the Green New Deal evolved from including federal jobs guarantee to adequate universal basic income or minimum income? Who wants to hit that one?
It's always had both. And in terms of the income, it's a guaranteed minimum income, not a, like Yang's $1,000 for everybody, including Jeff Bezos. We're talking about what Dr. King was talking about with the Poor People's Campaign and their economic bill of rights. So if your income's below poverty, and you do a tax return and you would get a monthly check to bring you up above poverty, it's like a negative income tax. So that's always been in there. And then a job guarantee. So it's not either or, it's both.
Okay, I'm going to go in reverse order. Markie, any closing remarks, or what do you want to tell people to find out more information about your campaign and work and stuff?
Yeah, I'll just say thank you. And I guess a closing remark is just to start having a different vision for how things are. And the sooner we realize that we're being loyal and obedient to laws that are man-made and ignoring these inherent needs of our ecosystem, we need to make that connection very quickly, because our health, our survival is directly connected to the health and well-being of nature. You can find out more about LIBOR at lakeerieaction.org. With COVID, we haven't been as active, but I'm hoping to get that changed very soon. And we are on Facebook as Toledoans for Safe Water. Thank you.
Dawn Marie, you have anything you want to add?
Recycle, reuse, and repair. If we stop sending so much stuff to the landfills, that'll make a huge difference right there, because the landfills are contributing to the contamination, and it's one of the situations that literally we've got to figure out what to do. That's it. Thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Dr. Jill Stein.
I will just end with a quote from Alice Walker, who said, "The biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with." The people who are, railing about how polarized we are, want us to feel hopeless and powerless. That's actually not true. If you look at the numbers, or if you're really out there talking to people, the predatory political system that we have, which is throwing us all, not just under the bus, but over the cliff, and maybe in the next decade, things are really accelerating, and we don't have time to allow ourselves to be powerless and hopeless. We actually do have the power. It's really all about methodically, connecting, organizing. Who was it who said, Jackson, I forget the name of the community, Jackson, I don't remember the name for it, but he said, don't agonize, organize. And a lot of people are overwhelmed with agony now, especially young people. And whether you are one of those who've been really just given a really horrific hand now, you've just been dealt cards, which are awful, or you've been in the generations that have allowed this to happen, we all need to say no. And it's fixable. And, thanks to all the people who've been working on policy, we have a great set of policies that can actually fix this. And the missing ingredient, I think, is for us to be working on this together. And many of us have been working really hard on political campaigns and challenging the political system. And it doesn't like that one bit. And it has all kinds of ways to try to shut us out. And, as Howie was saying, ranked choice voting and proportional representation are critical breakthroughs, but it's gonna be hard to even get that, so even just beginning to connect in our communities in a bigger way that leverages our power and our synergy is really powerful. And it's very important for us to turn the breaking point into a tipping point and take our future back. It really is in our hands, and we need to do it now. Thank you.
I will mention we will, send a follow-up to all the participants, and the panelists want to send us any links. They want to make sure it gets included in our follow-up mail-in. Howie Hawkins, last word. Bring us home.
Well, yeah, I didn't answer the question of, what people might do Earth Day to May Day. If they're still looking for something. I think supporting these pipeline fights, Enbridge Line 3, Enbridge Line 5, that's tar sands oil. We got to stop that. Dakota Access is still a fight. That's the Bakken frack oil. There's a new pipeline 900 miles from Uganda to Tanzania that a consortium of Western and Chinese oil companies are now going to build at the cost of billions. We got to stop this fossil fuel infrastructure. So, op-eds, letters, contact those campaigns, see what kind of help you can provide. The other thing I'd say is, we got to be in the streets. We also got to be in the elections, because if we're only in the streets, the Democrats are going to shrug their shoulders and say, that's nice, give us lip service and go about their business. We got to make them compete for votes. When I got 5% of the vote running for governor in 2014 in New York, Andrew Cuomo, who was trying to get more votes than he ever got, running for governor in 2010, more than his daddy, Mario Cuomo, ever got, and he got less, because you're looking at our 5%. So he moved our way on some issues he'd never supported, a ban on fracking, $15 minimum wage, paid family leave. We don't even have to win the office to leverage the political system our way. So I urge people to think about stepping up and running for office. There's old civil rights slogan, we're the leaders we've been looking for. Don't look for somebody else to do it. You know, you got to figure out what you can do. So good luck, everybody, and get out there and fight.
Okay. I want to thank Jill, Howie, Markie, Dawn Marie, and want to thank Michael O'Neill for helping to provide technical assistance for this event. Have a great Earth Day to May Day. Make waves, shake things up. Earth Day strike. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.